Sometimes I feel like, oh, I don't know if I should do this anymore. There's a lot of conflicts that can arise just trying to do something spiritual in the media landscape.
I'm realizing the human condition, you talked about it before, like anger, lust, greed, all these particular things. That's part of the lila, or the dance that we've all decided to do as divine creation, right? And it's not easy but to accept that that's part of humanity.
When you're chanting the names of God, the idea is not just that you're calling out, but in the calling out, there's a reply, there's a response.
The song of God, and this sense that the Gita is coming from the place of that song, that is always singing, that is singing through time, beyond time.
We all have a personal and unique relationship with God, and He's dancing with us in a special way as to what we need.
Hi everybody, welcome to our conversation today with this beautiful, beautiful soul, Jahnavi Harrison. Jahnavi is a kirtan vali and amazing musician that has a beautiful background that we're going to get in today, and that she sings the Maha Mantra in such a divine voice and uses it as a spiritual practice. So we're really excited. Welcome, Jahnavi. We're really excited that you're here and having this conversation with us.
We are
Thank you.
Jahnavi Harrison groupies. We've made this short film with Jahnavi on our platform that we love. We've got some of her kirtan from this space on our platform. So it's always special to be able to sit in conversation and share space. And yeah, we've been looking forward to this for a while.
I feel the same way. We're like family after our first time together last year. So thank you so much for the invitation to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do you want to start, Jeremy?
Well, so the theme of this month in the conversation is the Bhagavad Gita. And part of the reason that we felt like you were the perfect person to just kind of open a conversation into this beautiful text with is, one, the song of God, and this sense that the Gita is coming from the place of that song, that is always singing, that is singing through time, beyond time. And in your tradition, from my kind of outside understanding of that tradition, it seems like there's really two main gifts that have come to the world, and that He's given as messages to share. And one is the Maha Mantra, and the other is the Bhagavad Gita. And both of them are so closely associated with that tradition and with what Prabhupada brought forth and really encouraged people to share. And the film we made with you was kind of centered around your relationship with the Maha Mantra. And it feels like a wonderful opportunity to just talk to you about how your life has been affected by the teachings of the Gita, by the kind of perfume and essence of it, and also why you think that was such a primary text. There's so many beautiful texts in the Vedic tradition, but it was that one that seemed like Prabhupada really put forward as something for this time. And I'm curious why you think that was.
Wow, so many strands and beautifully, eloquently expressed. Well, just to, frame whatever I'm going to say, when you know that when you reached out to me, I was saying, I don't think I'm the ideal person to talk about the Gita, because I respect so many great teachers and scholars of the Gita, and I'm like, you should have them speak about the Gita. I feel like I'm a child when it comes to being able to understand or articulate spiritual wisdom, truths, or remember, like there's some of my friends can remember so many texts from not only the Gita, but many other books, and I can just about remember songs. Like, this is why I was mentioning to you that when I was in school, I grew up in a temple environment and went to school in that environment. So we learned how to sing both some of the Gita verses in Sanskrit, but also some of them were put into, we would sing the English translation as a way of remembering it. So, yeah, yesterday I was trying to do like a thought exercise of what if the Gita did not exist, or what if I had never come into contact with it. And it was amazing to me to try to, like there's some movies that have had a concept like this. There was a movie that was about what if the Beatles never existed. And you think about these songs that, permeate our kind of Western culture. So in the same way, the Gita, these vital concepts that are contained within it, what if those never entered my life? And it was quite sobering to think about how much it shapes and supports me, just feeling like I have the understanding of how to live my life, how to ride the inevitable ups and downs. I guess from a personal perspective, that gives me a sense of kind of proof, or I'm evidence that this book is important. It gives me so much courage. It gives me so much inspiration. But yes, to your question of, why was it so important? Why was it so important for Prabhupada? You were mentioning, coming from India to the West at the age of 70 was such a great endeavor, not knowing anyone when he arrived, to start giving Gita classes on the Lower East Side in Manhattan to, a lot of people that were seeking at that time. I think because the Gita, it gives knowledge about this world, it gives knowledge about the self, about the divine, and also it illuminates different pathways, or, it's one of the things that I think is really profound about it, apart from the fact that it speaks about birth and death and everything in between, and the nature of things, how to see into things. It's almost like giving X-ray vision, how to see into the essence of everything. But also, just like in Ayurveda, okay, if you can't do a month-long panchakarma, do this. If you can't do that, do this. It gives you almost like different medicines for, okay, if you can't live in this way, if you don't think I can be a spiritual person at this time in my life, just dedicate what you do through, mentally think, I dedicate this to the divine. If you can't do that, then do this. I feel like that makes it something which is there's something in the Gita for everyone. There's something that will benefit and enhance anyone's life. That's my attempt to answer your multifaceted question.
No, I think like he asked like the impossible question, I think he did like a great job. But, one of the things that really draws me to your beingness and your music is, over the last few years, I've read the Gita a few times, and my first spiritual teacher, he used to take a word out of the Gita every week, and he would lecture on it for like an hour. And so we would just get a word. But then I kind of read the whole text, back to front a couple of times. And then, like Krishna's like, I am the stars, I am the bow of Arjuna, I am this, I am that, I'm the cosmos, I'm this. And like when you're reading it, you're like, oh my gosh, like Krishna is like, is everything, like everything within, vyakta, avyakta, like everything that's in existence, everything that's not in existence, everything that will forever be in existence. And it kind of, your brain goes crazy. It's like, okay, it's like, the word Krishna, as opposed to being limited to the human body form, but when it's the mountains and the oceans and all this. And the reason why I think this conversation is so important today, and why you're way better than an academic, why we wanted your voice and not an academic's voice, is because, when we're listening to you on our headphones and the Maha Mantra, or in the theater with you, there's something that the backdrop of what Krishna is slips us into a state beyond thinking, beyond the thinking and the logical exploration of spirituality, but kind of into like a feeling or a beingness. And I think that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the art of kirtan that you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
can you elaborate maybe on kind of like the mysticism associated, like when you're singing the Maha Mantra, like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
if you get like lost in it, or kind of your relationship with the kirtan, Krishna, and the Maha Mantra?
Mm. Yeah, well, I mean, the Gita is the the core, you know, conversation of the Gita is between Krishna and Arjuna, and we can look at them as historical figures. But of course, from the perspective of the path of bhakti, or Krishna bhakti specifically, Krishna is, as you said, he is everything, everything manifest and unmanifest, and he is, as said in the Gita, the supreme friend. He says at the end of the Gita, I'm explaining all of this to you because I'm your dearest friend. And so I think that relationship with Krishna that comes through reading the text, for me, I remember many years ago, I think I was about 20, 21, and it was my first time reading the Gita cover to cover on my own without being prompted by, you know, my parents or having to do it in school. I was just like, let me just read this and have my own experience. And I remember one particular afternoon, some friends were going out, and I was like, no, I'm going to stay in and read the Gita. And I'm an introvert, so it wasn't that surprising to stay home and read. But I really had an experience with the voice of Krishna coming through the text and speaking directly to me, the reader, in a way that I think is very akin to the kirtan, the chanting of mantras, the chanting of, you know, whether it be the Maha Mantra or any of these, what's called Nam Sankirtan, when you're chanting the names of God. The idea is not just that you're calling out, but in the calling out, there's a reply, there's a response that may not be some you hear like, Jahnavi, you should go to live in America. But I wish it were that clear sometimes. But it's a feeling. It's a feeling of being held, being connected, and and so much more. You know, protection, home, love. It's difficult to put it into words because it is something so personal. But I believe that we can experience that in a multitude of ways. One may be through reading the text and hearing that voice, or it may be sitting in a kirtan and not understanding what is going on here, but I just feel good when I do this.
Yeah. You know what's so funny? I'm so glad you're mentioning this because, you know, we all have our journeys, our spiritual journeys as the decades go by. And, you know,
Yeah.
I started off with a teacher that, you know, talked a lot about the concept of personal God, the concept of bhakti, you know, all these particular things. And then I did a lot of like vipassana meditation, which at every stage has really helped me. And then it was kind of like this austere stillness that we kind of feel that peace and awareness. And a lot of like, you know, kriyas and stuff that I learned, like different lineages. And then now I'm about to turn 50, like in 2025 is my
Wow.
50th birthday. And
Wow.
I feel like a child again, you know, like I feel like the whispers of the divine, the like being held by like a mother, you know, like that type of energy and actually having those conversations. So it's so funny. It's like I kind of feel like I'm returning back to like where I started, you know, and it really isn't like a hierarchy, you know, there isn't that sitting austere for a really strong sadhana versus the joy and the play or hearing the voice of the divine. So I'm really glad that you're bringing that up, but it's like, you know,
Yeah.
these are real dimensions of spirituality.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love that Krishna in that section where he's saying, I am this, I am that. I love that he says, I'm the sound of silence, and I'm the taste of water. You know, I love that you can follow a path of an active sort of personal relationship with God, but also you can just acknowledge and remember at every moment of your day, every time you take a sip of water, remembering that statement can connect with the potency and the divinity of the taste of pure water and how it nourishes the body, like how elevating that is to remember that whenever you take a drink.
God, I
I
love
feel
that.
like,
I am the taste of water. Gosh,
yeah,
beautiful.
And then to the point where in the universal form, where he reveals himself as everything from the most horrible to the most sublime, that there is nothing that is not full of that divinity when you can kind of
yeah,
merge that. And one of the things that I connected the most with about the book is that it's not a philosophical text in any traditional sense. It's it's part of a story, and that you've got this narrative element that kind of makes it so much more personal and connective, where it's happening on a battlefield. It's happening at this incredibly heightened moment in this
yeah,
epic poem, and it's like time stops, and God and man have this dialogue outside of time,
yeah.
which I feel
It's
like
incredibly
somehow
dramatic.
is very dramatic. And I feel like it makes it that much more exciting and something that you can kind of relate to and connect to, which is part of why I thought that maybe Prabhupada had brought it forth in the way that he had, because it isn't a dry philosophical text. It's this incredible poem of life and war and death and families and
Yeah.
lineages, and it's really in the context of the Mahabharata where it sits. It's epic, and
Truly. Yeah. I mean, I think it, because it distills so much essential knowledge by which, like, it's almost like a pair of, I used to think of it as Gita glasses, like when you have those glasses on of these core, core sort of teachings, then how you learn and assimilate everything else, it's that much easier. Like it's sort of the building blocks for some of these conceptions about the soul and but as you said, delivered in a way that's very interesting and compelling. Yeah, on a battlefield right before the battle is about to start, and in the first chapter that sets the scene, you hear about the conch shells that are being blown and the sounds. You can feel the atmosphere of what's going on in this moment. So it's very compelling. And I know there's many times in my life where, I mean, everybody has those moments of life where you're like, what should I do? I feel so confused, or maybe I should just turn away from this path that I'm on and do something different. And I know that in those moments, not always by my own reaching for it, but through someone, especially someone like my dad or other people in my life who have been, a guiding force, they'll be like, but remember, Arjuna was asking that same question, or he had that same dilemma. And immediately it's like, oh yes, I remember. And you can start to recall the things that have been said, the things that may guide us forward on the path. So it's very, I feel like it's very usable in it, as very practical.
Do you worry about the world, or I know like a lot of people, it can be conversations in certain circles where someone's like, oh my gosh, what's humanity is kind of like at a tipping point right now, and kind of what's going on, especially anyone that either has young children or wants to start a family. It's like, okay, well, what are we bringing? What are we bringing these souls onto this planet? But like, does that cross your mind, or like, is that ever part of your awareness?
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely, I limitedly, or maybe too much still, I read the news, I look around me, I'm deeply concerned about the environment. I won't go into all the concerns because I think we all share probably a lot of them.
Yeah.
I think one difference one thing that allows me to somewhat detach from that fear is the fact that I grew up with the sort of, you know, the descriptions of this time that we live in now, the Kali Yuga, whether in the Gita or in the Bhagavad Purana, which is the other text that we've studied extensively when I was growing up, which speak about, they describe what's happening now and beyond. And so maybe there's a sense of like, oh, someone else knew that it was going to be this way because of this and this. So you have a view on, you know, what's the root cause of what's happening in society. And, you know, the Gita points to the gunas, these modes of nature, and the effect of lust, anger, greed when left unchecked. So being able to have a bit of ability to kind of see into what's going on, I guess it alleviates a bit the anxiety about it. It doesn't change the fact that we're all living in this time and we're going to be experiencing the effects of whatever is happening. But I think it just it kind of helps to be able to see what to do. I mean, it's one of the reasons that I think I could stay a bit more grounded in to continue doing what I do and sharing the music that I do, because sometimes I feel like, oh, I don't know if I should do this anymore. You know, there's a lot of conflicts that can arise just trying to do something spiritual in the media landscape of like how things are now, social media, or like having to self-promote it just feels very incongruent. But I do understand that these things are these teachings, these practices are a balm for the soul in the times that we're living in. So yeah.
And that's really where I was going with it, is that the fact that you're performing the Maha Mantra, and that's that vibration, like your work is that vibration. I would say our work is also, we're doing our very best for it to be like that vibration and put out in the world. So that, you know, we had a healer, we both have a friend who's a healer here in Asheville. And in one of my sessions with her, she said, the truth bubbled up. I don't even know who said it, but as if you work for 7 generations from now, then you'll enter a different vibrational state of functioning. And so when I heard that, you know, I really chewed on it for a couple of weeks, and it actually did really change. Because she said one of the things, 7 generations from now, they won't even know your name. They won't even know who you are. But the fact that you do seva, you know, for something 7 generations from now, really crystallizes the day-to-day, you know? And I kind of think that, yeah, it really has changed my life and how I act in the moment, because that you're serving something. And we think 7 generations, we only, you know, talk about like people or youth or whatever the case may be, but it's actually Mother Earth. You know, it is the entire ecosystem of that. And, but I don't want to sound bombastic, but I do think that what you're doing and putting that, you know, how you're doing your seva is helping that, is helping the whole world like heal. And I think it's real, and it's not easy. Like it's not easy to make a living in Ayurveda or in Kirtan or, you know, all these particular things, but somehow, you know, you choose to do that anyway, and we choose to do that anyway. So
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about the Kali Yuga, it's like, what do you do in this wild time that we live in? And thinking of these, the Maha Mantra and the practice of Kirtan bringing you into that state of beingness. One thing that Krishnadas said that really stuck with me is that the name comes from that state of beingness. And the recitation and chanting of it can bring us back to it. And I feel like the Gita is the fact that like the song of God, I feel like it comes from that state of beingness, and it can bring us back into that state of beingness. And what else can we do? Like when you reach a certain point, like what else is there to do but strive for that, but move towards that in whatever way that you can.
Right. Yeah. One of Krishna's statements that most comes to my mind. In fact, I have it on the back of my phone. Ma Shucha means do not fear. He says in the Gita, do not fear, you know, just don't let fear and anxiety kind of take over, because ultimately, as you were describing that, I was imagining this space of timelessness, where these names are vibrating, where, the soul, it says in the second chapter of the Gita, describes the qualities of the soul. It can never be burned or dried or moistened with water. It can never be destroyed. It's eternal. A lot of our fear, I think, I once read that all phobias eventually can be traced back to fear of death. And that was really like mind blowing to me. I was thinking, wow, is that like that? That's like the essential fear underneath everything. So I think when we can engage in those practices, certainly for myself, I mean, I'm speaking as someone who has a lot of tendency to fear and anxiety. I've a lot of life experience of like my mind going way out there and having to, either get help from my friends or myself, to bring it back in. So these practices that engage us in that timeless space are, supreme. I mean, I don't know anything else like that will have that effect, certainly on me, and I think there's many others who attest to the same.
So the balm that you're putting on yourself for, if we can kind of, the fear and anxiety that pops up in all of our lives, we just finished doing a home cleanse, with this group that's on the call right here, and it addresses Vata. So, from an Ayurvedic perspective, this time of year is really a time where fear and anxiety kind of culminates, and when the spring comes, you have a much more unctuousness. But one of the things we were talking about was that, doing a panchakarma, cleaning your colon, applying like loving, heavy energy to yourself is one way to bring anxiety down. But we also talked about the mind, the psychology, and the spirit part of it. But I know you talked about hearing what Krishna said reduces your anxiety. But what other things, like how do you reduce the anxiety like within yourself and fear?
For me, chanting is a huge part of that. I think all of the lifestyle practices that you just described and more, having an understanding of those things has immensely benefited me in my life. Like I grew up with some understanding of those things because it was sort of in the culture that was surrounding me. But there's a difference between being like aware of it and actually practicing it, especially as an adult. So, getting good sleep and what you eat and what you listen to and the friends that you have and all of that affects your mind, affects your, potential for fear and anxiety. But I feel like, if I was pushed against a wall and there's no other things that I can take support from, just bringing the mantra to my mind, to my heart, and out loud or internally, that has had a great effect for me. And I actually, there was a period in my life where, due to certain personal circumstances, I think Vata was like an all-time high for me. And I had a phobia when I was a child that flared up. I thought it was long gone. And for about a year, I was struggling with that. And I found that I tried a lot of different, techniques, but, part of the fear related to travel and being on the plane, but I had to take a flight. And my friend was trying to teach me about like, tapping and all these different things. And I was trying it, but I could not rein my mind. I was just like going wild, like a panic attack. And I decided to try. I got some good noise canceling headphones, and I put on a Maha Mantra kirtan of a great a Swami, a saint who I really, really admire. And he was singing, and it was a live recording from a kirtan where everyone was dancing and jumping and running up and down the room, and I just immersed myself in that, and I sang inside myself, just responding on the plane, and kind of just tried to go there. And I couldn't believe how effective that was for my for my fear. And so I've tried to do that, I've tried to engage with that in that way whenever I feel that way. It's hard, but it works.
For people who are maybe not as familiar with the practice of kirtan and
Yeah.
kind of what's underneath it, I'm curious your personal relationship with the idea of God with form and God without form. Krishna, the transcendent, energetic behind everything, versus Krishna, the blue flute playing hero of the Bhagavad Gita, and where, for your own internal process, where that dance flows between the form and the formless.
My understanding, and I think this is expressed in the Gita, but it makes sense to me. I've heard it described in different ways, is like the sun and the rays of the sun. The sun is a physical planet or star, or however you want to describe it. If you got very close to it, you would soon be very aware of that, because eventually you would just burn. But then the sun rays are diffused in all directions, that we can perceive them in different ways. Sometimes it's actually on our skin. Sometimes it's just illuminating an area in the distance. So I feel like it's a cohesive whole. Like I perceive the presence. I mean, I attempt to perceive, I could say. I'm not an enlightened being, but perceive the presence of God and God is in everything and everywhere, and as expressed in the Gita, within the heart of everyone. And yet I have faith, and I attempt to have faith in the times that faith is something that generally is wavering at different times of life, in a personal conception of God who has form, and who is someone that, in a physical, tangible way we can relate with. Not to say that I see God and talk to him and you look into his eyes, something like that, but there's other cultural elements of spiritual culture that enable us to engage with that relationship. Like there are places of worship, temples, forms, deities that allow us to offer service. So for me, I think both are really important, and the name of God, I guess, is in some ways the perfect combination of those things, because it's a personal name of a person, but yet because it's in the form of sound, it is not a form. It's sort of intangible. It's sound vibration. We can't see it, but we feel it, and yet we're still addressing a person. So it's sort of perfect, practical. Take it in your pocket anywhere you go. You don't need to have a temple nearby or anything specific. You can be lying in your bed and just bringing that name to your lips.
Yeah, it's I'm prepping. We're doing a 5-day immersion on the Gita later on this month, and I was
Wonderful.
gonna pick some shlokas out of there. And in relation to what you were saying, one of the ones that I was considering was, it's the same question, and I think I'm paraphrasing, but Krishna says that it's hard for the mind to hold divinity, but then I think it's the word Ashraya. He talks about the wonder, that when you have wonder, like when you look at the world and wonder, then you can kind of slip into this space of the divine. And also
Yes.
Sri Aurobindo, who is one of Jeremy's heroes, and one of mine as well. And, Sri Aurobindo said that the first step to spirituality is aesthetic beauty. So, like if you're looking at a flower and you kind of say, oh my God, that is just so beautiful, and I get lost in the beauty of the flower, then somehow you get lost in the non-thought. And that's one of the things, I think the divine is just so close. The divine is just so close to us. And sometimes the simplest acts of wonder that help us slip into that space, you know, or even hearing just
Totally.
a beautiful, the Maha Mantra, right? There's something, it kind of, you slip into this non-thinking space where manifest and unmanifest kind of blurs, you know? So it's really, really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's why art and music and all beautiful, beautiful things can so quickly bring us into that space, because it sort of bypasses the intellect, and it goes straight to the heart. We feel wonder or attraction, connection, and yeah, it's totally. I mean, you know, I think even for a person who feels that I'm not spiritual, I definitely not religious, you know, just to go like here, you know, near where I live, the redwood forest, to see those magnificent trees and feel the peace and stillness in that environment. Even if, you know, I went there with a relative who definitely would describe themselves in that way, and they were like, they're always, mind is always going, and they've got 3 kids, and they're just very busy, and the CEO of a bank, and she was just like, wow, yeah, you could kind of just become still and experience a moment of pause and timelessness and wonder.
You know,
So
I'm
yeah.
remembering, I've seen a video of yours a few years ago, and hopefully I'm not misinterpreting it. I might be. But what I remember, the images I remember in my head of it is kind of like you're dancing in the video, and it's kind of like, it makes me think of the whole concept of Krishna and the gopis. You know, can you talk a little bit about that and the dance of the gopis and like worship of Krishna, and you know, just maybe your thoughts on that?
What aspect of it? I think I know the video you're talking about, the Govinda Jaya Jaya. I
Yeah,
was
yeah, that's the one.
dancing on the roof in Manhattan, dreaming of, you know,
Vrindavan.
this beautiful pastimes in Vrindavan. Yeah. I mean, that topic is like, that's like at the heart of the Bhagavad Purana. I mean, I guess in a very simple way, because it's a very esoteric topic, but the pastimes of Krishna, where he connects with or engages in a divine dance with these beautiful maidens of Vrindavan, is both said to be something that is eternally happening, as well as an allegory for the soul and the soul's dance with God. That, you know, there's a moment in that pastime where all of them want to dance with Krishna. You know, imagine there's like a ball, and like there's this beautiful handsome prince who arrives, and all the girls are like, I want to be the one that he picks. And Krishna understands that, and he expands himself into many, many forms, so that each of them think that he's dancing only with me, and he loves me in a special, unique way. And so in that way, I think that's incredibly enchanting. And each of us has a personal and unique, even though there's billions of people, millions, you know, trillions when you count all the other living entities, the ants, the trees, you know, we all have a personal and unique relationship with God, and he's dancing with us in a special way as to what we need on our journey.
Did y'all celebrate Navratri in your ashram when you were growing up? Did y'all?
No, we didn't actually. It was something I became more aware of as I was growing up, because there were a lot of I mean, there were many people that were from a Hindu background, Gujaratis especially, and I think for them it was maybe something more cultural that they had grown up doing, but
Right.
it didn't happen in our temple. But we had a lot of dancing, and then later on I got to participate in some of the, like the Garba and for Navratri. Yeah.
Well, y'all are the leaders in dancing and chanting, so that's why I was kind of, you know, no one does it better. But yeah, I'm Gujarati, so Navratri, even at a young age, I mean, you dance into midnight. You know, it is just like, everyone's outfits are really beautiful when you first start off, but everyone's covered in sweat at the end of the night.
Disheveled.
And you know, I'll tell a story. I don't know if it's funny or not, but like, you know, because I was really into like Vipassana and more like austere type of spiritual practices, when I went to Albuquerque and I studied with Dr. Ladd, I remember like day 3, we had like a puja and everyone's up and like dancing and singing. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, where have I come? Like, what are these people are crazy. And I literally, I'll be honest with you, I was like, what? I was like, they're just singing and dancing. I was like, this is not spirituality. Like I kind of had like a moment. And then like, within like 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I'm up dancing with them and singing with them. You know, you just kind of gotta give it a go. You know what I mean? You gotta like just trust in the process. And you know, that being said, you know, for people that are listening to this, like what's a easy entry point? Like, do they just need to just listen to Kirtan or Maha Mantra, or what? You know, maybe like an individual practice if they wanted to experiment in their own space. You know, what advice
with
would you
Kirtan,
have?
like connection to mantra.
Yeah.
I think it's always wise to follow, like, you know, this. There's a writer, Elizabeth Gilbert. I heard her say, "Follow the sesame seed amount of curiosity." Good one for Ayurveda.
Yeah, it is.
Follow whatever's like. There's like a sesame seed amount of curiosity. Follow that train. So if there's an aspect of it that particularly seems like, well, what would that be like? Like, go a little out of your comfort zone and try it. So there's so many ways to approach connection with mantra. There's japa, which you normally do, you know, in sort of a more meditative environment. You can do it at home with some beads. Kirtan, you can you can just start by listening to it. Try putting some headphones on and kind of have an immersive experience, or also listening in your car. Like if you turn it up and it's like you're completely surrounded by it, you know? It's a nice way to experience it without feeling any pressure that you have to do or be anything specific. And I think just have an honest experience. And I really feel like it's something you don't have to force, you know? I feel like almost everyone can appreciate it. But you know, when you're young, sometimes there's vegetables you just really don't like. And then at some point you're like, wow, this is delicious. I can't believe I ever didn't like this.
Yeah.
It just naturally happens.
I think the car, I can imagine you in like Southern California with your windows rolled down, you know, and your hydraulics, and you got Kirtan blowing out of your speakers, you know. Is that what happens?
We live near the Stanford campus. My husband works on campus at Stanford, so sometimes I drive in to pick him up, and I put the windows down and I turn it up. I'm like, you know, these are like the future leaders of society probably studying here, so why not?
You want to hear something funny? So like we moved to Asheville, and you know, when I've lived in other cities, I kind of wonder, like, you know, like I don't want to be that annoying person that rolls with my window down. I got like Kirtan blasting, right? But like in Asheville, I actually roll my window down and people give you like the peace sign, you know? I'm like, oh, cool. It's like, it's awesome. So it's kind of, I just need to get some hydraulics on my car. But other than that, you know.
We're talking
Very
about
cool.
Kind of nature and beauty and the way that can bring you into connection with the divine. And one thing that I feel like is hard to experience is that the Gita is a work of art. It's a poem. When I had, through sort of like mystical and mysterious circumstances, came to study. I'll tell the story really quick, actually. I was at some yoga event and started talking to this older gentleman, and we ended up getting in a very long conversation. And after about 45 minutes, he asked me where I lived. Like, well, I was living in New York City at the time. He said, where do you live? I said, I live up in Harlem. He said, oh, I grew up in Harlem. What street are you on? I said, oh, I'm on this little street called Tiemann Place. He said, my grandparents lived on Tiemann Place. What building are you in? I said, I'm at 69 Tiemann. He said, that's the building I lived in that building. What apartment are you in? I said, I live in apartment 44. And his eyes just like exploded.
Whoa.
And he said, is it still that long hallway with the 3 bedrooms coming off of it? I mean, there's how many million apartments in Manhattan? And I was living in the apartment that this guy grew up in. So I invited him to come over. I said, "You want to come and see the apartment?" And he walked in. He said, "My grandfather sat in that chair for 40 years listening to the radio." He had this wild thing. And the whole time I'm wondering, like, there's some karmic connection here with this guy. Like, this just doesn't make any logical sense. And as we were talking, he started telling me about this Swami that lived on the Upper East Side that he would go and study the Bhagavad Gita with every week. And I said, all right, well, that's why this wild situation is happening.
Wow.
So I said, okay, before you leave, give me his phone number. And then I ended up studying the Gita with this Swami for years, word by word. And when I first approached him to study, he said, well, we can do this in English, but it's kind of like reading Shakespeare in Japanese. He said, you'll get the gist, but you're going to miss all of the beauty and all of the poetry. And I said, but I don't care about learning Sanskrit. And then I did, of course, to some small extent, where word by word he was unpacking it. And as he would unpack each word, the layers of meaning and beauty and the way the words would kind of balance off each other to create different meanings, it was stunning. And one thing that he had us do was sing it. So he would, as we would learn it, he had a meter, and we would, each of his students would have to sing the Gita. And when we were talking, I know that you have songs around the Gita. I'm just, not to put you on the spot, but if you were willing to share a little bit of song around the Gita, either one of the songs that you learned or chanting of a few verses, for people to experience a little bit of the art and poetry and that dimension of it that gets lost if you just pick up a translation and try to read it. It's hard to connect into that tradition and the however, the depth of time of people that have created these songs and traditions around it.
Definitely, yeah. The Gita sounds so beautiful when it's sung, and it's as it's meant to be sung. And there's like every year on the day that the Gita is said to have been spoken, some people dispute the exact date, but in any case, there's always a celebration. And in many places, the entire Gita is chanted over, maybe four hours or more, depending if commentaries are given in between. And just to take part in something like that, to hear it being sung and recited by so many people, even if you don't understand, and you usually can't follow the meaning of every verse fast enough because they go through it, but it feels so cleansing, so powerful. One of the verses, I'll sing a few verses, and maybe I'll just sing them and then I can tell you about one of them that's my favorite. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Dehinosmin yata dehe komaram yovanam jara tada dehantara praptir dhirastatra namuyati. Another tune you can sing. Vidya vinaya sampanne brahmane gavihastini sunichaiva svapake cha pandita samadarshina. And one of the, I'll just give an example of well, this is more like, I don't know how beautiful this song sounds, but it's a way that we remembered it as kids. So here's one of the verses in English in a way that we could, keep it close to heart. And this verse has helped me so much in my life. The non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception only, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Can you imagine bunch of 5 and 6 year olds singing that?
I love it.
You shouldn't have done it. We're sending you our kids. Southern California, so they're coming to your guest room in about a week.
Northern.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love, there's a lot of beautiful recordings of the Gita being chanted, and sometimes it's nice just, there's different ones sung by different people, but it's nice to just turn that on, that vibration, and and know that, even if, again, you're not following the meaning of all the texts, but there's an incredible wisdom being vibrated through those words
I was staying
as you
at
listen.
the Divine Life Society in Rishikesh on Gita Jayanti one year,
Oh, yeah.
and sat in and listened to all of the swamis singing it together for over several hours,
Wow.
and it was incredible.
Very
Yeah,
powerful.
it was beautiful.
Yeah. Some of my favorite verses in the Gita are, I think there's a lot of them in the second chapter, which kind of summarizes the teachings of the Gita, which are later then elaborated on. I love the teachings of the soul. The one that I just said, Dehinosmin yata dehe, that talks about as we pass through these different stages of life, from being a baby to a youth to, an adult, to being in the older age, and then eventually leaving the body. It says a sober person should not be bewildered by such a change. Verses like that, which sound very kind of like, it sounds very sobering because it's talking about the journey of life and aging and death. That has really helped me, because also growing up in a big community, you see a lot of the, I know a lot of adults, they've never still not had someone major in their life pass away, or not seen death in this very kind of visceral way. But I think when you grow up in kind of close-knit community, it happens more because there's just more people and you have relationship with them. So being able to be able to process that in this way, like to see that it's a natural cycle. So the verses, there's a verse, another verse that I just sang, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne. It's talking about the learned person seeing with equal vision everyone, from the species like the tree and the ant that are not deemed as important, to a very high status person in the world, seeing them with equal vision and relating with them in that way, as such, with love and respect. For me, that's another powerful one. There's so many.
Yeah, so many.
But yeah.
One of the things, that I think you have a very unique experience on is that, as we all know, it seems like, people move from neighborhood to neighborhood in their lives, and really do they know their neighbors? And I think that one of the, from an Ayurvedic perspective, the concept of a village is really important, and then the taking care of the old people and playing with the children and the laughter and knowing multi-generations of people. I think that I think it's medicine in and of itself. You grew up in an ashram, maybe if you can talk a little bit about what that was like, and maybe your learnings, and then how do you envision, I know one of the things Jeremy and I talk a lot about is creating a community here in Asheville that is like free and loving and not controlling. But I just kind of want to get your insight on your thoughts on that, the necessities of that, and how do you envision that, for in the future?
Yeah, this is a favorite topic of many friends, and we talk about it all the time, because at least the time that I was growing up, it almost seemed like, at least within our little world, a kind of a unique moment that was not really replicated in later generations. Like, even my brother didn't grow up in the same community that I did, in the sense that already many things had shifted. The time that I was growing up, many people were kind of engaged in work with and for the community. It was very not insular insular is not the right word, but it was very, like, there was a lot of investment from everyone into what it was. It wasn't like everyone's doing their life and then we meet, on the weekend to kind of catch up about life. It was like we're seeing each other every day. We're learning together, we're growing together, we're celebrating together. I do feel like I'm incredibly fortunate to have grown up in that way. I think it's definitely easy to romanticize what that can be like, because human beings, when they come together, inevitably, and the Kali Yuga is known for this, conflict. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be all kinds of other things. It is not easy to to be that close, and to, the idea of village life, like you can kind of feel like many times I think like, oh, I really miss that. But then I remember, sometimes you don't want everyone to know your business all the time. And that is how it is in the village life. Everyone knows what everyone's doing. But there's an undeniable core strength and support and love that comes from that. Like, I feel like I grew up with, about 10 mothers, because all of these different amazing women in my life saw me in that way as their child, and would care for me in that way. And I don't know, where do you get that experience other than when you grow up in those kind of village environments? Certainly not in most suburban settings. So as much as I desire it, I would say I probably similarly to you, like I often think, how did you recreate this? How is this possible? It almost feels like the current of modern life is directly flowing in the opposite direction. Seems like having a real immense dedication and perseverance, like that's what if I've seen it be created somewhere, and I do see a few places that I'm aware of, even in America, where it's being started from scratch and it's actually working. But it seems like you have to ride through those fails, sometimes things really falling apart, and keep building slowly. And it's like, to what you said about something for 7 generations from now, maybe we won't really see the ultimate blossoming of it in our lifetime even, which is really hard to accept, because you're like, I want to have that now for me. Yeah.
I think the maturity, like one thing, as the gray hairs are coming in, like accepting the human, I'm talking about mine, not anyone else. So just to make it very clear, I'm not that rude. Okay, but as my gray hairs are coming in, it's just, I'm realizing the human condition. You talked about it before, like anger, lust, greed, all these particular things. That's part of the lila, or the dance that we've all decided to do as divine creation, right? And it's not easy but to accept that that's part of humanity. And it's really interesting. This is probably a longer conversation another time, but me and a few friends of mine went to Costa Rica, and we went to a bunch of intentional communities. One group of people, they had some like kind of like an unofficial guru. The other people did not, and then you could see like the wisdom from the people that lived in these intentional communities, because you have to take care of each other. Does that make sense? And then you have conflict, and you've got all these different things. And one important lesson that I learned through talking to a lot of these people was that, and it's a Vastu concept. I remember my first day of Vastu class with my teacher. He said, Vastu, the number one principle in Vastu is space. Because I was actually living in an intentional community at that time when the teacher was teaching Vastu. And he goes, when someone feels that they don't have space, then it all falls apart. And even in a small apartment, do you feel like you have space? In a relationship, do you feel like you have space? And I think that's really important. From the people that have lived in multiple intentional communities, I felt that they thrived and they were happiest the most when they felt that they had their freedom and they could participate whenever they wanted to without any type of judgment. Does that make sense? So it's like this like voluntary participation. Sounds like a really simple thing, but I don't know, maybe that's kind of interesting, because you're right, having 10 moms, that is awesome. But at the same time, having 10 moms may not be as awesome if, they're all micromanaging you too. Like it's kind of like it's both of those. So I think it's very interesting.
So when are you going to get married?
Exactly. Everyone's got an opinion, but it's kind of like that joint family that drives you crazy, but at the same time, the love and the celebration that goes along with it. It's an interesting topic. It's how is it meant? I know we're not meant to live like the way that we've evolved into over the last 30 years that you see throughout America. And, even when I first moved to America in the 80s, we lived in like the country, but man, it was all the cliches were correct. No one locked their doors. Everyone sat on their front porches in the evening. You never knew where your kids were going to eat. Like wherever their kids happened to be, that's where they would eat. So like, I think there's universal values of village. I don't know. We need to find some middle ground maybe somehow.
Yeah, I think ways of perhaps creating that with an understanding of how people can engage with it on different levels. Like, you know, I think the community I grew up in was really, really wonderful. But I think sometimes when you have something that's based on spiritual principles, even if there's an expectation of a high level of commitment, sometimes people who can't always follow things exactly in that way, or who are on the periphery, there can be judgment, there can be, these types of attitudes. But I think the more there can be a sense of real health and trust between people, whether it be from the top down, if there's a leadership to the community, or between each other, that fresh air or the space, you speak about, I think that can really be an incredible situation. I'm like an idealist, so I do believe that I believe it's possible. I just think it's really hard to get it just right and to maintain that. But I do believe it's possible. I'm so inspired by the fact that you're inspired about this and that you talk about it a lot.
Well, I'm inspired by the fact that you're inspired by the fact that I'm inspired by it. But so we're at time. I think that one of the things that Jeremy and I talk a lot about is this concept of like men's groups, women's groups, think tanks. Just kind of the intersection of humanity on a lot of this ideation. And then, taking these ideation back to our own communities, if that makes sense. So I don't know. I think that, maybe I'm giving you too many compliments. I apologize if this, but I think that you have such a straightforwardness and sincerity in how you approach this thinking that, we're definitely going to hit you up and say, hey, Jahnavi, we're meeting twice a year. Show up and, share some of that wisdom. Because I think that being in an ashram, I studied in an ashram in my older years, like, 2021. For 2 years, it was all boys ashram. And I just think that some of these experiences are so life-altering. They're so different from what other society goes through. And I think there's wisdom that's accrued from it that's worth sharing, So we'll pull on you.
Yeah, well, gladly. I mean, any excuse to be in your orbit. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it's wisdom, but definitely life experience can be useful to see what not to do sometimes also,
Yeah, well, we're at the end here, and I think a lot of kirtan walis, I'm pretty sure y'all don't understand how much your song heals all of us. Does that make sense? And it's just like in our lonely moments, when we're getting an abhyang, when we're like vulnerable, it's like, you, Krishna Das, there's so many people that are just putting beautiful stuff out there. So I will speak for humanity and say thank you. Okay, we're very, very grateful for what you put out there. And also, we wish you in all your dreams and aspirations, we wish you success and prosperity and joy. And, may you be close to Krishna all the time. Mira, I'm sorry we didn't get to your question. I love you. We'll do it another time, okay? So anyway,
Thank you for the shower of blessings. Thank you both so much. Such a privilege to speak to you this morning. And thank you to everyone that took the time to tune in.
Take care.